Welcome to the Mount Hamilton Baptist Church podcast. We're glad you're here. We're a church of connected, Christian, and missional people here in Hamilton, Ontario. We meet every Sunday morning at 10:30-ish, and we'd love to have you come join us in person. Come as you are, and all are welcome. For more information about Sunday morning worship, our other ministries, or how to get connected in community, please visit our website at mhbc.ca. Now here's the sermon.
Hi, I'm Leslie Makins, one of the pastors at Mount Hamilton Baptist Church. This is the first week in our new series called My Favorite Bible Story. In this series, we'll have a variety of stories that people will be talking about, sharing stories we find in Scripture that we have found meaningful and impactful in our own faith journey. Some stories were recommended by you, the MHBC community. Now, I have a few favorites myself. Zacchaeus climbing the sycamore tree to see Jesus pass by. Thomas, a faithful follower of Jesus who got the nickname Doubting Thomas. Junia, a female apostle who Paul called outstanding among the apostles. And Amos. I'll never forget when an Old Testament professor randomly said Amos was a fig plucker. For some reason, I've never forgotten that, and I find it such a random, funny detail, but it moved him to the top of my list because of that profession. But my favorite story of all is a really old account about a man named Moses. Moses has a huge representation in the early books of the Bible. Some scholars speculate that he lived during the 13th century BCE, so around 3,300 years ago and 1,300 years before Jesus' birth. But other scholars are not convinced and say that it can't be dated with any certainty. Moses was a Hebrew man. Now, you'll hear in this sermon Hebrews also being called Israelites. That's the same group of people. Moses had a brother named Aaron and a sister named Miriam. Old Testament scholar William Van Germeren says that God set Moses apart as my servant, a relationship of confidence and friendship between a superior and an inferior. Moses occupied a huge place as God's friend. He had enjoyed the privilege of close communion with the Lord. The Lord would speak to Moses as a man speaks with a friend. This is not to say that it was all an easy road. It was not. As with any human, there were bumps. Moses faced many challenges. God gets angry with him. People break the rules, and there's tension between the limitations of a human being and a holy God. Throughout the book of Exodus, we find God providing direction to Moses as the Israelites travel in the wilderness for 40 years, as he makes and restores a covenant relationship with them at Mount Sinai, and as they journey toward a land that God has set aside for them. In fact, you can read about Moses hearing from God in the 2nd to 4th books of the Old Testament, right back at the beginning. The books are called Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And it all started with my favorite Bible story. It all started at the beginning of Exodus. So let's go back to the very beginning. Moses was actually not raised by his Hebrew family, but he grew up in Egypt's royal family after his mother creatively saved him from death when he was a baby. Although he lived in Egypt, there were many Hebrew people there as well, and they had it really rough. They were a marginalized community, they were treated very poorly, and they were forced to work under slave masters in oppressive conditions. This was extremely troubling to Moses. And one day Moses was walking in the streets and he witnessed an Egyptian man beating a Hebrew worker. Moses was enraged and he killed the Egyptian. Well, word of this got around and Pharaoh found out, and then Pharaoh wanted Moses killed. So Moses left Egypt and he settled far away in a place called Midian. Things were ticking along nicely for Moses in this safe place. He got married, he had a son, and he worked as a shepherd with his father-in-law. And that is where this story begins. Our reading today is from Exodus, chapter 3, verses 1 to 10. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that, though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I'll go over and see this strange sight. Why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Imagine just doing your thing, tending the sheep, and a bush begins to burn with a messenger in a flame, and it just keeps on burning, and God begins to talk to you about this dire situation in Egypt. Now, right away, you might immediately have started to think, I resonate with that. I've been crying out to God myself, and I want God to rescue me. Perhaps you or someone you know has experienced oppression in some way. Maybe your heart is hurting because someone you know is experiencing injustice or discrimination right now. Maybe that's you. Maybe you are not being treated fairly. Or maybe you or someone you know is going through a totally different type of pain, something that has caused you to cry out to God. Maybe it's something really private. Maybe no one even knows about it. Maybe you are desperately waiting for God to intervene. Well, I don't know your circumstances. I am so sorry this is happening. Please know that God is with you and them. God sees you and hears you. God cares and will never leave you. I hope and pray for peace and resolution, and that you can find some hope in the midst of it. Well, in the reading today, we discover that Moses was the person that God had chosen to use to accomplish his desire for freedom for the enslaved Hebrew people. Moses would be God's hands and feet. Moses would be the one to take action. There are many people who have stood up to injustice in our world. We think of Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King Jr., Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony, Desmond Tutu, Rosa Parks, and Mother Teresa, who gave everything she could to help those living in poverty. I don't know what their motivations are or exactly how they were called to action, but we can track the result of their work in our history books. However, in this reading, it is clear that Moses had a direct call to action from God. Now, I realize that Moses was likely in awe as he stood on holy ground hearing the voice of God, but bear with me as I consider what Moses might have been thinking as he heard what God had to say. God said to Moses, I've seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of the slave drivers. Moses might have been thinking, yep, that's true. I saw it too. I'm so glad you know what's going on. God says, I'm concerned about their suffering, and Moses thinks, yes, it is so bad. It's so good that you care. This is great. God says, I've come down to rescue them and take them to a new, beautiful land. And Moses said, perfect. I can't wait to see this. Let me know how it goes. And God says, so Moses, you go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And Moses shakes his head and says, What? What did you say? You want me to do what? I imagine that Moses was totally on board with everything God was saying until that very last part. So Moses, now you go. I'm sending you to be a key player in getting this done. Well, Moses wasn't overly confident in this task, and the remainder of chapter 3 and half of chapter 4 tells us about it. Moses had 5 objections, and God had 5 solutions. Moses' first objection was, I'm not good enough to go to Pharaoh and lead the people out of Egypt. And God's reply was this, I will be with you. Moses said, but I don't have enough information. God provides the answers. The people might not listen to me or believe me. God provides miraculous signs for Moses to do it. Moses is like, I don't have the skills needed for such a task. I'm not a good speaker. God says, I'll help you and I'll teach you. And finally, with no excuses left, he just pleads and he says, please just send somebody else. So God brings alongside Moses his brother Aaron, who is a good speaker. And the 3 of them work as a team, God, Moses, and Aaron, all working together. Isn't it just like God to call an imperfect, not so strong human being to do the things that seem too big or too hard for them? And isn't it just like God to stay with them? And isn't it just like God to make a way? Well, spoiler alert, Moses does go to Egypt, and he does lead them out of slavery, and eventually he does lead them to a beautiful land. Now, I must admit that when I felt God asking me to quit my job and go to seminary to do my Master of Divinity degree, I felt a whole lot like Moses. I had many reasons for not doing this big, scary thing. It was hard. I felt inadequate. I didn't feel worthy. I wasn't sure if I could actually succeed, and I wished that God would send someone else. I was that imperfect, not so strong human being that knew I needed to do something that seemed too big and too hard for me. And spoiler alert, I did it, and I graduated. In fact, I did better than I could have ever imagined. And God stayed with me and taught me a lot, and God made a way, and it turns out I absolutely loved it. Does any of this resonate with you? I think it's quite common for people to resonate with Moses. Now, you may not have encouraged a burning bush that tells you to go to an Egyptian pharaoh, but you may have encountered God's good and gentle voice at some point in your Christian journey, and that may have led you to act in some way. Well, maybe you wouldn't describe it as an audible voice, but maybe you would describe it more like a gentle whisper, or something that you sensed, or a nudge or a tap from God, or even a persistent idea that needs further discernment. Every one of you have your own stories to tell. Your stories might include things that were pretty easy for you. Have you ever had it happen to you where you're standing in a grocery store, or you're driving your car, or you're walking down the street, or you're just doing your daily task, and suddenly someone pops into your mind? And you think, that's odd. I wonder why I'm thinking about them right now. Maybe you pray for them, or maybe you give them a call. And has it ever happened to you that you've done that and they've said something like, I can't believe you're calling right now? Or maybe you've had a strong sense to share your faith with someone, and you're in a conversation and the opportunity has never arisen, and suddenly a door seems to open, and it just seems the right time to share. Has it ever happened to you where you have felt very drawn to donate your time or your money or items to collect, it may be a collection here at our church or something in the community, where you feel very drawn that you want to be part of this project? Is it possible that it wasn't just some idea that you had, and it was really the Spirit of God that lives in you? Is it possible that the Spirit of God might have been inviting you to make a difference? Could it be that in those moments you were actually hearing or sensing the voice or the nudge of God? Or maybe you sensed God impressing something big on you, something daunting, something persistent, something that led to some sort of discernment, some sort of seeking wise counsel and prayer and asking God to make it really clear to you. Have you ever experienced something like that? Did you ever ask, why would I do that? I'm not good enough. I'm really nervous. Someone else can do it. Well, there's some really good news in all of this. God's assurance in those situations is different than human assurance. When Moses came to God with his feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness, God replied very differently than we do in 21st century culture. It's our tendency to think from a self-focused position. We have to muster up the courage. We have to stop being fearful. We have to believe in ourselves. We see it in memes, on Facebook and Instagram. We see it all the time, all over the place, and we say it all the time too. And it's not necessarily bad to say or read these things, but it is amazing to see how little pressure God puts on Moses' ability to do the task in his own strength. In this section of Exodus, God responds to Moses in a way that is not Moses-focused at all, but God-focused. Moses says, "Who am I to go? I am not worthy to do such a thing." God doesn't say, "Oh, Moses, you're so strong. You're so worthy of going. Just believe in yourself." God did say, "I will be with you." In essence, trust in me. I'm not leaving you alone. Moses said, "I don't have the skills of speaking that I need to do this." God didn't say, "Oh, Moses, you'll be great. You've got this." He said, "I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say." Moses said, "Can you just send somebody else?" God didn't say, "Come on, you can do it. Just dig deep into your strength." God did say, "Your brother Aaron is a good speaker. Tell him what to say, and he can speak to the people for you. I'll be there helping both of you speak and will teach you what to do." And this beautiful team is formed. Well, any strength or confidence or lack of fear that Moses shows has little to do with Moses at all. It has everything to do with God. And for us, it really isn't about us as much as we might like to think. It really is all about God. When things are hard, or if we had hard decisions to make, and if we think God is inviting us to do something that seems out of reach, and we don't think we can do it, we don't hear God say, "You've got this." You hear God whisper, "I am with you. I will help you. There will be others who will come alongside you to do this task." We might want to read Exodus and think Moses is the hero of the story, but it really isn't Moses. God is the real hero of the story. And when we sense there is something God is inviting us to do, we are not the heroes of our stories either. In truth, we often don't know if it is God or just an idea that we had. But if some time has passed, we can stop and we can reflect back on it. And even if we didn't see it at the time, we might find ourselves saying, "It sure seems like God was involved." So maybe you can find a friend in Moses. I know I did, and I still do. To Moses, God spoke through a burning bush, and it was very clear. In the 21st century, we might prefer something like a text or a call or an email from God, being clear on what we ought to do. But of course, we wouldn't trust that either. But we do have the Bible. We do have an awareness of and a sensitivity to God's presence, and we have the opportunity to talk to God all the time. And we have a community of godly people around us to talk about and live out our faith. And we have a God who is with us when we have hard things to do and hard decisions to make. Over 102 years ago, Wentworth Baptist Church did a really hard thing when they started a church way up on the isolated Hamilton Mountain. And for over 102 years, Mount Hamilton has responded to God's call, answering, "Here we are." May each of you continue to listen for God's call and respond, "Here I am," knowing God is with you, especially when things seem particularly hard. I want you to just take a moment to consider 2 questions as you hear this sermon. The first question I want to invite you to consider is this: what one thing sticks out to you? Something that caught your attention or something you resonated with, either from the Bible reading or from the message that I shared. What one thing stuck out to you or resonated with you or caught your attention? The second question is this: do you think there's some relevance to the fact that this stuck out to you? Do you think you might need to give it some time, some more thought? Do you think you might want to pray on that one thing or talk to others about it? And why do you think that is? So those are the 2 questions that I have for you. And I pray that God will use your time of reflection with him to see if he is inviting you to something today. Let's pray. God, would you continue to sustain, equip, lead, call, and be the strength of this church and each one who calls this home, now and in the years to come. Amen.
Thanks for joining us today. If you have any questions or thoughts on this teaching, we'd love to hear from you and connect. For more information about our church and all the things happening at MHBC, you can visit our website at mhbc.ca.